Hello and welcome to Fuse, the 15-minute podcast for professionals in PR communications and marketing from PRCA. This is a special edition, and normally when we say that there's a special edition, it's because it's, around a commercial event, or it's around an announcement of a report, or the such like. This is a very different time in the world, and I was on Twitter, and I read this post from PRCA, and it was a statement, and the statement goes as follows. The Public Relations and Communications Association, PRCA, has warned its members that they face expulsion for working with Russian organizations on the sanctions list. It's also urged members to consider the reputational consequences of working for companies which, whilst not sanctioned, nevertheless have links with the Russian government. The Russian government's actions in Ukraine are an appalling attack on humanity, and the PRCA stands firmly beside Ukraine and the defense of its sovereignty. The PRCA has supported the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Ukraine in recent days by coordinating volunteer communication support, and more than 100 PRCA members from around the world have offered practical assistance. PRCA Director General Francis Singh commented, "We can be under no illusions. Russia is now a pariah state. Our members cannot, under any circumstances, support organizations that are on the sanctions list." So I read this, and then the opportunity came up that I would be able to connect with the team back at the office and just say, well, what is it that I could do? What could we do here on the podcast? And I'm very thankful that Jock Mendoza-Wilson, Director of International Relations and Investment at SEM, which is one of Ukraine's largest companies, is here with me today. Jock, apologies for the long intro. Normally it's much shorter, but I thought it was really important that we get that in there. Firstly, thank you for joining us here on Fuse, and how's everything there?
Good morning, Dan. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I think it's very good that you make that clear at the start, the PRCA's position with regard to working with Russian companies. Today, I'm joining you not from Kiev. I'm joining you from my home in Somerset. I fled Kiev last Thursday morning, shortly after the first salvo of rockets hit buildings around the outskirts of Kiev. I was really awakened at 5:40 in the morning with the unmistakable sound of explosions on the edge of Kiev, and put in place at that point a predetermined plan to remove myself from Ukraine as quickly as possible for my personal safety. So now I'm operating from home here in peaceful rural Somerset, but nonetheless I'm deeply engaged in all the work that's going on in Ukraine and trying to get people out and trying to get humanitarian aid in, and I'm delighted to have the chance to talk to you and others this morning.
So from the point of view of organizationally, it could almost seem crass to look at this as a point of view of how's SCM as an organization doing, how's the business, but actually when we talk about conflict, when we talk about the disruption that comes from an invasion of this level, part of it is what is there in terms of infrastructure, what is there in terms of normality to be able to support people and support as much as is possible everyday life?
Well, the first thing you think about when you find yourself in a conflict zone in the middle of an aggressive war, an invasion, is that you think about the safety of your employees. That is the absolute prime consideration. Are they safe? How can you make them safe? What advice should you give them with regard to their safety? How can you help secure their safety if that is indeed possible? So think human safety and resilience, the first things that business thinks about when it finds itself in a crisis like this. And my experience, I have to say, regrettably, I was in Donetsk in 2014 when the Russians launched an invasion there, and I was in Kiev last week when they launched the invasion there. And what you note if you've been in a war zone is that the things that are familiar to you, the everyday life that you experienced, change immediately. And so elements like the operation of metros, the operation of mobile phones, the operation of internet, shops to get food from, these become unstable. One of the first things that tends to go is the banking system. For example, as of last Friday, Thursday and Friday, people were desperately trying to get money from banks because very often the digital banking that we're used to doesn't operate any longer. You need cash, you need folding money, and people try to get as much of that as quickly as possible. So one of the first signs you see is long queues around banks. Our business made sure that employees were paid as quickly as possible so they could access the cash earlier than they would otherwise have been able to do by bringing forward the salary payment date. That's one of those practical steps you can take to ensure that your employees are taken care of. And then, of course, people should not go to and will not work where it is not safe to do so. Nonetheless, our business is a large financial and industrial group, a strategic investor in Ukraine's economy, and we have businesses that need to run. They need to run 24/7. We have a bank. People need to access their money. So it's an enormous challenge. And I can't say that, I'm the person who can maybe tell you about what we're doing, but it's the people at the front end who are really doing it that are the heroes during this conflict.
Now, I was looking at SCM as a structure, as an organization, and where your footprints are in various parts of Ukraine. And was it the steel business has a footprint in the east of the country?
Yes, we have two large steel plants in the east of Ukraine, in Mariupol. We also have a steel plant in Zaporozhye, which was in the news today, because of the hit by Russians on the nuclear power station there, which thank God didn't breach the nuclear the generating chambers. And we have a number of businesses in the east of Ukraine. So I honestly haven't been in touch with colleagues yet on the current situation on the ground. For example, the situation in Mariupol is catastrophic. The city is surrounded by the Russian invaders. The city is being heavily shelled. I watched a podcast from my colleague who heads a local news program down there, local news station. The situation is grave. So in that situation, I get my news almost as others do, perhaps through traditional sources, but also through my personal contacts. And we try to do what we can to maintain continuity, but above all, maintain safety. And we're already, our businesses and the foundation of our shareholder, Mr. Akhmetov, the Vladimir Akhmetov Foundation, are working around the clock to try and offer assistance to those in need during this dreadful conflict.
Just to put this into perspective for people who've never lived in Ukraine, you've clearly spent a significant amount of time there. Talk to me about the normal everyday to-day life, the thing that's stopped right now, and the resilience, the resistance of the citizens of Ukraine that we're seeing in the media, and how these are friends and colleagues that you worked with.
Ukraine is a modern European country. It's a country that is in transformation towards, I think, the intended target of being a member of the European Union. I worked there for 16 years, and I've seen that transformation take place in people's mindset, in the infrastructure, in the cities, and the development of culture. And you just get up and go to work. Or you go and do what you do. You take the kids to school. It's normal. It's the sort of life that you're living wherever you are, whether you're in Canada, whether you're in London, whether you're in Milano. It's in that way a normal European lifestyle in Ukraine. And so Ukraine is part of the European Union. In fact, geographically, it's the biggest country. In fact, it's part of Europe. It's the biggest country in Europe. So, it's normal. There were lots of expats living there until recently, and you would have a normal life. But however, there is a resilience in Ukrainians that we might not find so readily in Western Europeans, and that resilience comes from the hard times that they've had to cope with. If I take the Ukrainian journey, there's the separation, follow the Berlin Wall, the independence of Ukraine from the Soviet Union, which was overwhelmingly voted for by Ukrainian citizens. Then we have the economic crash after the Soviet Union, when people were growing potatoes and relying on very much on self-reliance and barter economy. And then we have the Orange Revolution of 2004. And then we have the Revolution of Dignity in 2014. And so in a way that perhaps other Europeans don't have, they're very resilient. They're able to cope with the challenges that life throws at them. It's not their first difficult situation they've had to face. And because there have been so many threats, particularly from Russia, towards Ukraine's sovereignty and independence, then there is a kind of esprit de corps, a patriotism, a belief in a free and democratic Ukraine. And this runs through the center of each Ukrainian. Whether they're from the east of Ukraine or the west of Ukraine, they're united in their belief in their country. And this gives them the strength that we're seeing now, in adversity of the worst type, to stand up and indeed, in many cases, lay down their lives to protect the values of democracy, freedom, liberty, European values, international values that Russia wants to blow away in a tsunami of explosion.
One of the things that has really stood out is leadership, and leadership from Zelenskyy has been, it's almost in days we've seen this iconic style, and I'm sure that books will be written into the future once we're back to a hopefully soon and rapid peaceful state with Ukraine retaining its sovereignty and being strengthened within its resolve. But we are seeing someone who really can communicate. We are seeing someone who is really leaning on building good relationships, and it's been a path of his leadership since the election that he's valued relationships. He's valued bringing people closer and not having a wall between Ukraine and outside of Ukraine, particularly with Europe, from what I observe. And one of the things that I saw earlier, and again, it's on Twitter, but it's, in times of need, it's a channel that can be certainly very on the money. And it was a nice tweet. It was a discussion between, and apologies, I can't remember. I'll put links to it in the episode. But Zelenskyy was basically referred to as today's equivalent of Churchill. And he took this compliment. He thought about it, and he responded with, I take that as a compliment, but I certainly drink a significantly less than Churchill ever did. And even in the times when it's like, I cannot imagine what the pressure is like, but humor and humility at the core of the man, that is something that really truly comes through.
I think what you're seeing here is, Zelenskyy's career before he went into politics, surprisingly into politics, shortly before he was elected, he was a comedian. He was a very successful actor, comedian, and ran a very successful production company. And so he has that ability to reach beyond the screen, which great politicians have. And he has that. And he has a second talent, which you've highlighted by your point, is that, look, he quickly grasped the importance of digital media, how immediacy is a thing. The old-fashioned press conference is usually out. What's in is a piece to camera immediately, tweeted out or Facebooked out or Instagram, that reaches in the moment, just at the moment of the story, and delivers a telling comment or a telling image. And the other aspect I'd say about this is images. We've got a guy who can deliver a soundbite like no other. And I'm going to give one, you gave one example, I'll give you another example of it. It was when asked in a call by Biden whether he needed a helicopter out in evacuation. He said he didn't need a ride, he needed ammunition. That's going to be on T-shirts. That is something that it describes the situation the country's in a few words. Mm. And people believe that because it's true. Because he could have taken the helicopter out, but he didn't. He stayed in the bunker to fight. And I think that type of viewpoint and his ability to grasp images, speed of thought, and narrow them into an absolutely wonderful, passionate, emotive message that connects with his own citizens and with the international community is essential. And another point here is he can communicate this in at least 3 languages. He can do it in Russian. You may have noticed when he wants to speak to Russian citizens to go over the heads of Putin and others, he speaks to them in Russian. He apologizes to Ukrainian citizens. He switched from Ukrainian language. He moves into Russian. He delivers a message to the Russian people who know him because he's appeared on Russian television. This is genius in communication. He's natural. He doesn't have to learn it. He's not taught it. He's not been media trained. It is him. And that's why it's so tellingly effective.
When I look at the usual elements of conflict, and we're seeing things that are relatively conventional from the assault and also non-conventional behavior that we're seeing with the attacks on citizens rather than just strategically beneficial sites identified from the aggressors. We're in a situation where SCM, your organization, has a media arm, and one of the core things when we talk about communication that gets the aim is to shut down cultural icons, media, communication, power, water, etc. As an organization, from the perspective of an organization that operates a media entity, how does it fit for you going, we've got to keep this going organizationally so that information can still get out there, so that people can still feel connected rather than being in a country and isolated into pockets?
Well, the power of communications is vital in creating a unifying force inside the country. It's also important in terms of communicating so people understand exactly what's happening. So you can perhaps help to manage and keep down panic by talking about in a more rational way about everything that's going on. So that element of communications is key. And of course, we're the broadcaster of Ukraine 24, the Ukraine's most popular news channel, as well as Ukraine's most popular TV channel, Ukraine. And these two sources, I think, we're not alone in being a broadcaster. There are many others, but from our point of view, it's about sustaining the service and getting the news out and information to customers and trying to talk them through the concerns they now have every day in their lives. I was watching in Mariupol the broadcast from the head of the station down there, and he's telling people, he was broadcasting each day. Yesterday he's broadcasting from his basement, and he's explaining, what do you do in time of crisis? Where can you go? What's the water supply like? Where's the energy? Will there be electricity? Is there bread supplies? What are the casualties like? I mean, they're very difficult broadcasts for me to watch because he's a friend. But the media has a huge influence in time of conflict, which can be used positively or negatively. We see in Ukraine it being used positively. We see it being used in Russia negatively. You need to have nothing that reminds us more of the need of strong, independent, creative media than this conflict, because of the sharp contrast between the truth spoken by the West and in Ukraine and the lies delivered in Russia. And media like ourselves and Western broadcasters, when we think about media, we need to think that if we're trying to get a message to the other side, we're also going to have to communicate in their language. We may not want to use the Russian language, but we may have to in order that we can reach over the sort of iron wall of propaganda and get into the hearts and minds of people on the other side so they understand that the information they're being fed is lies. So at the core of how we got here was a failure to address the disinformation war that Russia's been running at home and internationally. And one of the challenges for us as public relations, communications, and marketing professionals going forward is to challenge information whenever we see it. Because if you don't challenge information, and we didn't challenge information sufficiently, it can lead to the breakdown in society. We have to have a truth, and not all truths are equal. Something is the truth, it's the truth. It's backed up by facts, it's not backed up by lies. And as media professionals, we've got a role to play in doing that. And I was really happy to hear about the PRCA's statement early on, insisting that businesses stop working with Russian-orientated businesses immediately. Because, we cannot help them. This is not an equal situation. This is good v evil. You have to choose a side.
There's got to be a commitment on this one to support the truth, to support facts, and to be willing to challenge misinformation when it appears 100%. And if we go back, let's say 2016 and further, we've too often got into this position where it's a case of, okay, they're just saying that we're going to rise above. We'll just move on from it. They're talking to their echo chamber, to their bell curve of people. Let's leave them over here. But the truth is that when there's that silence and no challenge, it's this pervasive growth of, well, it's not going challenged, so it must be the truth. And that
Absolutely.
is deeply problematic.
Yeah.
In terms of the help that you would like to see from communication professionals, from marketers, from people who can just help. Obviously, there's a big campaign by the Red Cross internationally. The UN, through their various campaigns, are also doing fundraising. There is a significant, and I've never seen this before, significant campaign from Ukraine's government in terms of alternative fundraising through, digital currencies that they've been stepping into, which has been completely eye-opening. The digital minister, I saw him on TV last night, and it's like, I've never seen, Dogecoin, Ethereum, and Bitcoin being donated and being used in this way. From the terms and looking at the purpose of this production and the people who we are speaking to, what is it that you would like to see maybe additionally, if it's not just challenging misinformation, if it's not just helping direct people towards fundraising and support, what is it that you would hope that our fellow communicators, marketers and PR professionals can do to really shine light or help donate? What would it be?
There are about 3 points I want to make, and I'll begin with repeating something that I said and the PRCA said is, cut your Russian connections, cut your Russian clients, remove them from your client list absolutely now. Cut your Russian suppliers as well. It's the morally right thing to do, and anyway, you'll be forced to do it shortly if you don't take that action immediately. So as we always say in the business, go out, get ahead of the curve, do it now. And do it publicly. And explain why you're doing it. And explain to your supplier while you're doing it. So they understand each opportunity to create a connection and communication about the facts and truth with someone is powerful in changing the situation inside Russia. Secondly, Russia needs to be sent to financial, cultural, and sporting Siberia. It should play no part in the future, going forward, in the life of a civilized world. I have worked in Russia. I spent a lot of time there. I speak Russian. But let me be clear, I am not against the Russian people, and I'm not suggesting that we, the global communications industry and the West, should be against the Russian people, but we must be against the Russian government and those around the Russian government that support this outrage. So the Russian government must be sent to Siberia. And then I think the next part is fight disinformation wherever you see it. Have nothing to do with government-owned Russian media in any way. Don't watch Sputnik. Don't use Sputnik. Don't look at Russian Today either. If you see information, disinformation in the media, counter it immediately. It's crucial to do so. And last point here is support Ukraine. And how can we do that? There's the fastest way. I've also, after the war in Donetsk, I worked with the United Nations as part of their humanitarian country team, helping aid go to Donetsk, representing the Rinat Akhmetov Foundation. And what I know is the fastest way to get money to people who really need it in a crisis is to donate it to a big international NGO, because they can move quickly and decisively in putting money and goods and products into the places they need to go. So the fast response right at this stage in the crisis is give them money to a big NGO. If you've got goods and stuff you want to give it again to a large international NGO. They can consolidate and move. Small NGOs, they will not like this PR people from small NGOs who I've worked with and I think are wonderful. But in the initial stages, work with the big NGOs. Then look how you can become more specialist in terms of helping NGOs that are right for your business and your business model and the passion that you have in your business for doing good and helping society. Then find that other NGO that can help in the second phase of assistance. And the last point is, whichever country you're in, bring people in. Ukrainians are well-educated, talented, smart. They will want to work hard for you. And at some point, they might want to go home. And we all hope they can. So can you give them employment opportunities? And, you know, lots of Ukrainians are just marvelous at working remotely. They may not even be in your country. They might be somewhere else. Look at creating those opportunities. Look at how you can deliver those for Ukraine. And that's what I think that everybody out there in our industry can do to make a difference.
A lot of us are very fortunate. We've never lived through something like this. You've been in a position where you've experienced these aggressions before firsthand. You've seen how it's affected the citizens. You've seen how it's built the resolve, but how nice it would have been that they never got to that stage in the first place. And we're seeing this cyclically again and again. And it's when will it end? Well, working together with the things that you've suggested and being welcoming and being able to challenge that misinformation. If there's something that we've seen certainly in recent times, it's the war on facts and the information war that has just grown and grown and grown. And that's something we certainly need to acknowledge, deal with, and not necessarily that bit I was saying earlier. It's like, oh, it's them over there. They're, you know, it's the cranks. It's the people, you know, I'm not engaging with these people. I'm just going to block them. I've been through a period of time where I've blocked people who I've known for a very long time, but I made a conscious decision, and it was around the COVID thing. It's like one thing after another in the world, but around the COVID thing, I said, no, I'm not going to block anyone anymore. I'm going to engage. I'm going to have those conversations. And the hope, the dream, that goal of helping people understand a different perspective based on fact, based on truth, not based on misinformation, not based on someone else's agenda, but just putting the information there and going, here's a pathway to find facts. You can meet these people. You can talk to the scientists in that case. Jock, I wish your colleagues and you the very best moving forwards. I wish the citizens of Ukraine nothing but the best, and send love to each and every one of them. I'm very glad to see international efforts for people who have the opportunity to leave Ukraine are in place to help people reunify outside the country with other members of their family who aren't here or who aren't abroad already. And also that different governments around the world are relaxing work permits so people can stay longer, relaxing permits and requirements for entry. And whether that's here in Canada, the UK, and other parts of the world, it's very encouraging. And you know, Europe coming together to really step up and help in every way that they can. And I hope that that's a progressing story moving forwards. Jock, if people wanted to find out more about you or get in touch, how could they do that?
Well, I think they should look at, if they want information what's going on, they should look at the website of the Rinat Akhmetov Foundation. So they just do that, Rinat Akhmetov Foundation. It will give them information of what's happening now from a humanitarian point of view and the assistance we've needed. And as I repeat again, if you want to give quickly, give to a large international NGO like the Red Cross, like Save the Children, who are already on the ground and active in Ukraine, and who I know from working, or may I also add Médecins Sans Frontières, I know from working with these people on the ground that they will deliver the aid that's needed at this stage in the crisis.
Jock, thank you so much for joining us here on this really special edition of Fuse.
Pleasure, Dan. Thank you very much for the invitation, and be safe, everybody.